Some cars don't just fail, they fail loudly, publicly, and sometimes catastrophically, taking company reputations and owner trust down with them. In the 1990s, British motoring faced one of its most turbulent decades. Brands that once built empires were struggling to stay relevant. Caught in the middle were everyday drivers who believed the brochures, trusted the badges, and paid the price. Some of these cars were supposed to save British motoring entirely. Others simply made things far worse. Stay with us, because the closer we reach number 1, the more damaging this becomes. Let's begin right at number 10. Number 10, Vauxhall Calibra. The Vauxhall Calibra arrived in 1990 wearing looks that genuinely stopped people in the street. Its drag coefficient of 0.26 made it one of the most aerodynamically efficient production cars in the world at the time, an extraordinary achievement for a mainstream British-built machine assembled at Ellesmere Port. The turbocharged 2-litre version offered a respectable 204 horsepower, and for a brief, glittering moment, it seemed as though British manufacturing had produced something genuinely special. But this is where everything began to quietly unravel. Beneath that gorgeous bodywork lived cramped rear seating, a compromised boot, and mechanical reliability that tested owner patience steadily across the decade. The interior quality felt oddly dated against that dramatic exterior, and engine issues grew increasingly common as mileage climbed. The Calibra aged without grace, and many owners found themselves wondering whether they had simply purchased style instead of substance. Do you remember seeing one gleaming on a British forecourt, wondering if the future had finally arrived? Number 9, Rover 600. By 1993, Rover desperately needed a credible executive saloon to challenge the Germans and hold its ground in the fleet market. The answer was the Rover 600, a car built on a Honda Accord platform, which should have guaranteed genuine mechanical respectability. And in many ways it did. The engines were reasonably composed, the ride was acceptable, and the interior carried that distinctive Rover warmth of wood veneer and soft leather that loyal buyers genuinely appreciated. But here is where the disappointment quietly took hold. While the mechanical bones were borrowed from Honda, the body engineering and build quality proved deeply inconsistent. Rust appeared on early examples at an alarming rate. Panel gaps told their own uncomfortable story. Electrical systems became increasingly unpredictable as mileage accumulated. And crucially, the Rover 600 suffered a fundamental identity problem, perceived as neither a proper Rover nor a proper Honda, leaving buyers stranded in an uncomfortable no-man's land. Some enthusiasts still defend it passionately today. They are becoming increasingly rare. And there is a far stranger failure still to come. Number 8, Jaguar XJ-S. The Jaguar XJ-S had been in production since 1975, and by the early 1990s it was visibly carrying the weight of those years. Facelift versions arrived in an attempt to modernize the aging Grand Tourer, and briefly, a refreshed interior and the revised AJ6 engine gave it renewed purpose. It remained a beautiful machine, long, low, and unmistakably Jaguar in every proportion. But beauty, as buyers discovered, was not nearly enough. Owning a late XJ-S required extraordinary patience, significant financial reserves, and a specialist garage on speed dial. Electrical gremlins became the stuff of genuine legend, systems failing quietly and mysteriously at the most inconvenient moments imaginable. Cooling system failures and head gasket problems shadowed certain engine variants persistently. And the V12, magnificent as it sounded at idle, consumed fuel at a rate that made even generous owners reconsider their choices regularly. For a car that cost so much to purchase, it cost considerably more to keep. What happened next shocked even loyal Jaguar devotees, because things on this list are about to become considerably worse. Number 7, MGF. When the MGF launched in 1995, it felt like a genuine resurrection. Britain's most beloved sports car badge was returning after years of neglect, riding on a mid-engine layout that promised real driver involvement. The 1.8-litre K-Series engine offered reasonable performance, the styling was modern and confident, and early press reactions were genuinely warm. For a moment, British sports car manufacturing seemed to have recovered something it had lost entirely. But the real disaster was only just beginning. The K-Series engine, shared across the struggling Rover group, carried a notorious structural weakness in its head gasket design. Owners began reporting catastrophic coolant failures at worryingly low mileages, and the problem was not isolated. It was systemic, expensive, and deeply corrosive to the MGF's long-term reputation. Buyers who had fallen in love with the badge found themselves facing repair bills that made no rational sense against the original purchase price. And yet, remarkably, some still argue the MGF was worth every penny of that heartbreak. Subscribe for more stories like this. The failures ahead are even harder to believe. Number 6. Rover 200 Coupé. The Rover 200 Coupé arrived in 1992, designed to bring a quietly premium flavor to the small car segment. It was elegant rather than exciting, a three-door with a roofline that tapered cleanly towards the rear and an interior that genuinely reached for refinement in a class not traditionally associated with it. Engine options ranged from modest petrols to a more spirited 1.6-litre variant, and the cabin carried the restrained, thoughtful detailing that Rover buyers had come to expect. But expectations, once raised, become dangerous things. Build quality proved inconsistent from example to example, with some cars leaving the factory in noticeably better condition than others produced the same week. Electrical components developed habits of their own. Corrosion visited early examples faster than it had any reasonable right to. And the Rover Group's deepening financial turbulence during this period meant that proper development and long-term model support both suffered quietly behind closed boardroom doors. The 200 Coupé was a genuinely attractive idea that deserved far better execution. Stay with us, because the failures ahead become dramatically more significant. Number 5. TVR Cerbera. The TVR Cerbera arrived in 1994 promising something almost no other British car could offer, a hand-built, lightweight, rear-wheel drive Grand Tourer powered by TVR's own AJP6 engine, developed entirely in-house at Blackpool. With over 350 horsepower available in later variants and a body that looked almost violently dramatic, the Cerbera rewrote expectations of what a British driver's machine could feel like. And yet, this is precisely where the story becomes genuinely complicated. Reliability was not a concept the Cerbera took particularly seriously. The AJP6 engine suffered from significant teething problems including oil consumption, cooling failures, and unpredictable breakdowns that tested even the most committed enthusiasts. There were no driver aids whatsoever, no traction control, and no margin for complacency at speed. Several owners described Cerbera ownership not as motoring but as an intense personal relationship, passionate, occasionally transcendent, and sometimes catastrophic. Would you still dare own one today? Many do. Even more have lived to deeply regret the decision. One car on this list nearly destroyed an entire company. And it is coming very soon. Number 4. Lotus Elan S2. Lotus had built its entire identity and philosophy on the phrase, adding lightness, and when the Elan returned in 1994 in revised S2 form, technically a continuation of the 1989 original, expectations within the enthusiast community were quietly but seriously significant. Here, after all, was a Lotus. A British sports car carrying genuine heritage stretching back through decades of motorsport history. But what lay beneath the pretty shell caused immediate and deep controversy within motoring circles. The Elan used an Isuzu-sourced engine and front-wheel drive, a layout that violated almost everything Colin Chapman's founding philosophy had traditionally represented. The car handled competently, the steering received genuine praise, and the performance was sharp enough to satisfy most drivers on a winding road. But it felt philosophically wrong to those who understood what Lotus was supposed to mean. Sales were slow and never recovered. Lotus eventually discontinued the model quietly, acknowledging in doing so that the experiment had not succeeded as intended. It remains one of the most debated and divisive British sports cars of the entire decade. Number 3. Rover 800. The Rover 800 had launched in 1986 as a joint venture with Honda, carrying genuine ambitions of challenging European executive rivals at their own game. By the 1990s it was still in production, facelifted, carefully updated, and increasingly outgunned by far stronger competition from Coventry to Stuttgart. The refreshed interior offered wood veneer and soft leather, and the six-cylinder engines delivered real performance credentials on paper. But the Rover 800's fundamental problems were structural and reputational rather than cosmetically fixable. Electrical systems remained a persistent and worsening source of owner complaint. Body corrosion that had haunted earlier production never fully disappeared from later examples. And crucially, the British buying public had begun quietly losing confidence in what the Rover name actually represented anymore. Fleet buyers moved elsewhere. Private buyers hesitated at the showroom door. The premium positioning Rover desperately needed was being systematically undermined by its own product quality. What happened next nearly destroyed the company entirely, and one car in particular would become the single most damaging symbol of British automotive decline in the entire decade. Number 2. Reliant Robin Mark III. The Reliant Robin had survived decades through something approaching sheer stubbornness, a three-wheeled, fiberglass-bodied economy car that found a curiously loyal following among buyers seeking minimal taxation and low running costs. In 1990, the Mark III arrived wearing slightly modernized styling, and against all reasonable expectation, a certain loyal section of the British public welcomed it warmly. But the fundamental engineering reality had not changed in any meaningful way. Three wheels and a high center of gravity created a cornering dynamic that ranged from unpredictable to genuinely dangerous. The Robin's documented tendency to tip under enthusiastic cornering was not mere urban legend, it was a measurable, recorded characteristic that police incident reports confirmed with uncomfortable regularity over the years. The 848cc all-aluminium engine itself was not the problem. The problem was geometry, stubbornly unaddressed. Beyond the safety concerns, the Robin carried an image burden so culturally heavy that ownership required a complete indifference to public opinion. Some still love them passionately for exactly that reason. They remain, somehow, impossible to ignore entirely. But number 1 makes the Robin look almost sophisticated. Number 1, Rover 100. Nothing on this entire list caused more genuine, lasting damage to the reputation of British motoring than the Rover 100. By 1994, the aging Metro had been rebadged and carefully presented as the Rover 100, a refined city car with stated premium intent and a refreshed face designed to convince buyers that something meaningfully new had arrived. The reality was that beneath the updated name sat engineering fundamentally unchanged from the early 1980s. And then came 1997. The Euro NCAP crash test program published its results, and the Rover 100's performance was so catastrophic that it shocked the British public, the motoring press, and the automotive industry simultaneously. In a frontal impact at 40 miles per hour, the passenger cabin collapsed around the test dummy in ways that made the footage genuinely disturbing to watch. The steering column intruded violently. The footwell deformed beyond reasonable measurement. It recorded among the lowest scores ever published by the program. For a car still actively sold to British families as a safe everyday purchase, it was a moment of utterly devastating public exposure. The Rover 100 was discontinued shortly after. No amount of nostalgia has ever fully rescued its name. These 10 cars represent something more than simple failure. They are a complicated, sometimes painful chapter in the story of British motoring, a decade when ambition outpaced ability, when commercial pressure exceeded engineering resources, and when buyers trusted names that could not always honor that trust. But they are still part of our history. Do you remember any of these from British roads? Which one surprised you most? Let us know in the comments. This is exactly the kind of conversation we love having here. Subscribe to Britain Rewind for more forgotten stories from the heart of British motoring. Because even the failures deserve to be remembered properly.